everybody. Welcome back to our Light of Kailash lecture series. And thank you. Tonight we have Professor Rachel Pang, who's joining us from Davidson University in the US. She's a professor of Asian religions. She's worked on Shabkar, as we will hear tonight, a wonderful Tibetan non-sectarian master and poet, of course, and writer. And she's currently pursuing her studies and research on Amdo Tibetan literature. And thank you everybody for joining us. And Rachel will tell us a little bit about how she first got into Tibetan studies. I'm always curious to hear that, who the person is behind the article. And so thank you, Rachel, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jamyang Oliphant, for inviting me to give a talk today. I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon and this evening for, I think, a lot of you. So to begin with the first question of how I got involved in all of this, well, I started my journey as a pre-medical student. And I was in the sciences and biochemistry, and there were some courses in religious studies and English literature that were really fascinating to me. And it eventually led me in university to study Tibetan literature, Tibetan religion, and I went to grad school for that. And with regards to Shabkar in particular, what interested me was the very first class I TA'd for at the University of Virginia, we read his Namtar. And I really thought it was a remarkable text and it was a remarkable story. And eventually my dissertation advisor, David Germano, and I decided that I would work on that for my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation. And so I did my research in Amdo. And when I was on the field, when I was on the ground, it really became clear to me that Shabkar is still very alive in the imaginations of Tibetan Buddhists to this day, not just in Amdo, but also in Lhasa and all over the Tibetan cultural area. So I'm really delighted today to be sharing my thoughts and research on Lama Shabkar Tsokdruk Rangdrol. So
I forgot to mention to everybody that I first heard about Rachel from Matthew Ricard. He told me, I was asking him about Shabkar, and he said, oh, maybe some of you know, he did this fantastic, huge book on Shabkar. I think it's collected writings, if I remember correctly, published by Shechen and Kamandu. And I read this book, it's incredible. And then I was in touch with Matthew Ricard, and he said, oh, I'm too old, I don't give talks anymore, etc. But do reach out to Rachel and complimented your work. So I forgot the side note. So please.
That's very flattering coming from such a great meditation master in Lotsawa. So I'm very humbled by that. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share my slides. Let's see if this works. Okay. Yes, it looks like it's working. So, oops, here we go. So who is Shabkar or Shabkar Tsokdruk Rangdrol? Shabkar was a meditation master, a very, very famous one, a non-sectarian master from 19th century Amdo. And so he's famous for a lot of things. He's famous for his songs of spiritual realization, his autobiography, his promotion of vegetarianism. He wrote a series of 9 emanated scriptures, or Julbe Lekbam, and he's most famous perhaps for his non-sectarian activities. But today I'm going to just focus on a few of those themes. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about his background and where he's from. I think it's actually really important to his non-sectarian attitude and approach. So we take a look at this map. This is a map of what scholars call cultural Tibet. And it is made out of much more than just the Tibetan Autonomous Region. It includes a lot of the Eastern Tibetan areas as well. And Shabkar was from the northeastern province of cultural Tibet, which is Amdo, which is on this map. If you see in the very top right-hand corner, there's a little house and it says a city called Xining. So Xining is a very large city. He was a little bit south of that, south of the river, of the Machu River in Tibetan, or Honghe in Chinese. And he was just kind of south of Gumbum, south of Xining, in a valley called Rakgong. And This is what Rapgon looked like way back in 2010. There hadn't been much built. I heard that there's a lot much more built there, but I haven't been back since then. This is the Rapgon Valley. It is very celebrated for its Buddhist learning. They have a very vibrant community of monks and also tantric lay practitioners. It's surrounded by mountains, as you can see. And on the bottom right-hand corner of this slide is wheat fields. The reason why I show this image is because this valley is called Sermojong, which means the golden valley of Rapgon. And it's golden because during harvest season, all the fields are completely golden. And it's really a really beautiful sight to see if you ever get a chance to visit. This is the Rapgon Valley in general. This is actually closer to Rongwo Gonba. Shabkar is from a series of villages called Shompong in Amdo dialect. This series of villages, and I have this image from a book about Dome Rapgon's history. This series of villages is really, really famous for their lay tantric practitioners, or ngakpa. And it was into a family and community of ngakpa that Shabkar was born. And Shabkar practiced the Nyingma practices very intensely in his youth. He also studied with a lot of non-sectarian masters who simultaneously practiced Geluk teachings at the same time. And this was very common in the Amdo area. It was common for people to practice both Nyingma and Geluk teachings, although sometimes there was tension between the two. But by and large, there was a lot more sectarian cooperation between the two sects in the Amdo region. And his home hermitage, so his village was way back here in this slide, but his hermitage is actually 45 minutes hike up this mountain. So when you look across from where you're supposed to hike, you're going to see this little mountain valley thing. If you turn around and you hike 45 minutes upwards, you will arrive at, oh, sorry, this is the other image. This is the image of the sheep from the other side as well. So it's a very pastoral area. If you hike 45 minutes up the mountain, you will see the hermitage where Shabkar did most of his meditative retreat, and it was kind of his home base, especially after he was ordained at age 20 and became a monk. And so in this very, very beautiful mountainous area, which I heard when I was there, a lot of the religious practitioners said traditionally they didn't have access to water at the top, so they had to actually walk very far to get the water and to bring it up. So we're talking about real religious commitment here. You can see his hermitage, and this is called Dashikil Hermitage. And this is the home hermitage of Shabkar, where he did a lot of his meditation and teaching and writing and so forth. I also show you a picture of his throne. This is his throne that was outside of his hermitage, where he gave a lot of his teachings and he sang a lot of his songs. So in addition to these sites where Shabkar came from, I also want to show you his travels across the Tibetan plateau. So I made this map myself to show how vast his travels were. He's also very famous for this. This pilgrimage took almost 20 years. It took approximately 18 years for him to do all of this traveling. So he started in Rapgon. He went to the Blue Lake. You can see in the top right corner of the map. He went to White Rock Monkey Fortress, Amye Machen. And as he did this pilgrimage, he would stay in meditative retreat. He would sometimes teach and so forth. And he went eventually all the way to Lhasa in central Tibet. He visited the 3 great snow mountains, Mount Sari, Mount Lapchi, and Mount Kailash. He also even went as far as Nepal, where he actually gilded the Bauda, we call it Bauda Stupa, but Bodhnath is the actual name. He actually gilded the top of it with gold. So he really was very extensive in his travels. He also studied with a group of masters from a variety of sects. And that's, I think, a really important part about Shabkar. He really was very non-sectarian in his approach. But if I had to say what he mostly trained in, it was probably Nyingma. You see Nyingma, his kind of home training, but he also trained in Geluk and Kagyu teachings, as well as a lot of other smaller schools as well. So how do we know so much about Shabkar? He was a very prolific writer. He has 14 volumes of collected works, which is remarkable for a figure who is known mainly for his oral genre of gur, or songs of spiritual realization. And this edition of his woodblock prints is very remarkable because during the Cultural Revolution, the original woodblocks of this gurbum, or collected works, was actually destroyed. And through the hard work of Mathieu Ricard and his team, they were able to collect all of the remaining woodblock prints they could find of Shabkar's collected works, which was published in this Shechen edition in 2003. There's also a Qinghai edition of this text. I've examined it alongside the Shechen woodblock edition, and I found at least one occasion where there's an omitted passage. So generally, if you want to do research about Shabkar, I recommend that you work from the original woodblock prints. Although, of course, the modern edition is easier to read, but this one is more kind of accurate to the original, even if it might have typos and so forth in it sometimes. So Shabkar is known for many things. I listed it at the very beginning of my talk, but I made a list for it just to show you again. He's famous for his meditative realization. He's famous for his songs of spiritual realization, or gur. His autobiography is one of the greatest works in Tibetan literature of the Namtar genre. He was a staunch advocate of vegetarianism, which is remarkable on the Tibetan plateau, given how it's really hard to get access to a lot of vegetables, a variety of vegetables. And he was completely vegetarian. He's famous for non-sectarianism and his 9 emanated scriptures. In today's talk, I'm going to focus on 3 themes. The first theme being his meditation and his meditative realization. The second being his songs of spiritual realization, or gur. And the third being his non-sectarian activities. And through today's talk, I'd like to show how these 3 areas of his oeuvre and works are actually connected in a very, very meaningful way. Okay, so let's now first look at his collected songs, which make up 3 volumes of his collected works. So it is a remarkable collection, not only because of its virtuosity, simplicity, beauty, the depth of its religious message. It's the largest known extant collection of songs of spiritual realization, or gur, that is known to us. If you know of a different text, please let me know. I would love to amend that statement if it's incorrect. But as far as me and my colleagues, this is the largest collection we have found so far. It has just under 1,200 songs, and the autobiography, both volumes, contains an additional 600 plus songs. So this is almost 2,000 songs that we have of Shabkar. This is even more than Milarepa. Shabkar is thought to have been a reincarnation of Milarepa, and we don't have thousands of songs from Milarepa from his Gorbum. So this is quite remarkable. These songs of spiritual realization are composed and performed extemporaneously. And that's why they're so famous, because he doesn't spend a lot of time composing it. He just is able to sing it because of his meditative realization. And although they were composed and performed extemporaneously, he kept written records of them. And we know this from his autobiography. He talks about keeping records of his songs, written records, that he kind of sent around to his disciples, which were ended up being all over Tibet. The majority of these songs were sung in meditative retreat at holy sites, really remarkable sites across the Tibetan plateau. I'm going to show you 2 of those sites where he sang the songs that I'm going to present today. The songs are in a variety of meters, ranging from 3 to 15 syllables per line, with the majority of the songs being between 6 to 9 syllables per line, which makes a lot of sense because 7 syllables, 9 syllables, a lot of the chanting texts are 7 or 9 syllables, and then 6 syllables is the meter of Lhasa folk song, and then 8 syllables, depending on how it's cut up, is often the Amdo folk song. So it's a mix of kind of religious monastic genres plus folk song genres, all within his collected works. But what's really remarkable about Shabkar's oeuvre is that there's only 1% of these songs that contain 4 to 5 syllables per line. It's really, really hard to compose songs with only 4 to 5 syllables per line that actually make sense. And I'm going to show you one of them today just because it's so remarkable. But these songs are also remarkable because a very high proportion of them are songs of the view, or dagur. And these songs are purportedly supposed to directly convey the experience of awakening to its audience. So it's kind of a direct access to the awakened state of mind of the master that he's trying to communicate to his audience. And so the very first song that I'm going to present today was sung at Mount Sari. Mount Sari, as you can see from this map, is located on the border between Tibet and modern-day India, Arunachal Pradesh, as you can see right here in this red area here. And so it's kind of closer to central Tibet and a lot farther from his hometown of Lhasa, but it's a very important sacred mountain in Tibet. I'm just going to read to you my translation of this song, which you can see only has 5 syllables per line. And I'm going to put up the Tibetan for those of you who'd like to look at what the original Tibetan actually says. So I'm going to read through this. 5-colored rainbow and the sky, empty and luminous, are within the vast expanse. In terms of emptiness, they dwell as one taste, but in terms of appearance, they arise as many. A marvelous spectacle. Seeing this itself, it is certain that cause, effect, and interdependence are infallible. That I understand. The phenomena of samsara and nirvana, and the mind itself, empty and luminous, are within this vast expanse. In terms of emptiness, they dwell as one taste, but in terms of appearance, they arise as many. A marvelous spectacle. Seeing this itself, all obstacles, eternalism, nihilism, and so forth, are liberated without remainder in the expanse of the Dharma Dhatu. All spiritual instructions, such as those that dispel obstacles and enhance practice, just take a rest for a while. Give this song to people who appreciate good melodies. They will say it's beautiful and make it widely renowned. So unfortunately, unlike the songs of Kelam Gatso, we don't have the melodies recorded that are widely available for people to know how this song was originally sung. I did hear that it was kept alive in the Tantric Ngakpa communities, but I don't have access to them, so I'm not able to present that to you. But today we can work with some of the words in his song. So this song, I'm not someone who has a lot of meditative realization at all, so this is really my best guess at an interpretation of it. What I think this song is talking about is it's describing the state of the awakened experience, or the experience of enlightenment. And in this state, there is an experience of emptiness that is inseparable from appearances, the next slide, cause and effect, interdependence, samsara and nirvana, and all obstacles such as eternalism and nihilism. All of these things are self-liberated within the state of emptiness. And so within this state of emptiness, inseparable from luminosity, etc., Shabkar is saying, just take a rest for a while. He's telling his audience to rest in its natural way of abiding, the natural state of the mind. And that is the enlightenment experience that he's attempting to convey to his audience. So I wanted to just start with that poem, this really beautiful, remarkable poem, as the very first poem in my presentation today. And then I'd like to now move to another topic, non-sectarianism, which we're going to connect the dots by the end of today's presentation. So we've looked at the enlightened experience. We're going to now look at non-sectarianism. So the word non-sectarianism is actually, in Tibetan, it's chokri meba, which is more literally translated as impartial or unbiased. Sometimes people will contract it to rime and just use the word rime in English, or non-sectarian. And because of the really influential scholarship on the non-sectarian movement, people often think of the authors of Jamgon Kongdrol and so forth from the 19th century when they think of the term rime. But in fact, through all my studies with these great Tibetan Buddhist masters, I learned that rime is not exclusive to the 19th century. It is actually an attitude that is present in the works of a lot of great Tibetan masters all throughout the ages, even tracing its way back to the Buddha. And so it's kind of hard for us to remember that sometimes because of the influence of the scholarship on the non-sectarian movement of the 19th century. But I want us to all kind of think back etymologically and also from a practice perspective to what Chogri Meba means. So as I said in my point earlier, rime is most often translated as non-sectarian, but it literally means not taking sides. Like chok is sides. Chogri is again to be in one direction. So not taking sides or directions. It means to be impartial or unbiased. And this state of impartiality or unbiasedness is not kind of in the modern sense of the word when we say we're not discriminating people, we're being impartial and unbiased. It's not exactly in that sense. In the text that I studied, impartial or unbiased means it's actually a description of the natural state of our minds and the basis of reality itself. So I really think you need to really read this term from a practitioner's perspective. And it is, from descriptions that I've seen of it, a state that is free from extremes, in which one does not discriminate between concepts and binaries. And you really got that, right, in the previous poem when you talked about all obstacles such as eternalism and nihilism are self-liberated in the Dharma expanse. So Shabkar, this is a idea that he really homes in on in his collected works. He says, for instance, so this is from the third volume of his collected works. He says, the yogin who has not abandoned bias, even if he practices, has strayed into being a charlatan. So he's very critical of people who are biased towards sects or anything else. And it's very clear in his collected works that his non-sectarian attitude emerges from this state of abiding in the mind's natural condition, literally in Tibetan, neluk, the way of abiding. So I'm going to read a few quotations about this. The first says, the mind's natural condition is primordially emptiness clarity. It is impartial and encompasses all. This way of abiding is devoid of limits or center. And this way of abiding, he's telling people how to work with it in this next quotation. Always observe one's own mind. It is without bias, without basis, without abode, and directionless. So in this last series of slides, I'm connecting Shabkar's non-sectarian attitude to his enlightenment experience. Okay, so keep the idea of non-sectarianism in your mind. And I'm now going to move on to this this is the second poem. This is the second poem that we're going to read today. And this poem is remarkable not because it's 5 syllables in its line length. This is a remarkable poem because of where it was sung. So this is, I'm sure many of you recognize, this is the Blue Lake, Zhongmenbo, Qinghaihu in Chinese, Lake Kokonor in Mongolian. This is the water of the lake. It's turquoise. It makes sense it's called the Blue Lake, Zhongmen. It is located to the west of Xining in modern-day Qinghai province. And what a lot of people don't know is that at the very center of this lake is an island. And this island, traditionally, populations in this area only had access to it in the winter. And this is because in the winter, the ice would freeze over. And when the ice was completely frozen, the pilgrims or the meditators would walk across the ice, the frozen ice, and arrive on this island. And the meditators who had planned to stay for the entire year would bring an entire year's of provisions with them. onto this island where they would meditate for the next year. And so if you didn't bring enough food, you really were kind of stuck. There were no options. So we get stories of meditators on this island who shared food with one another. They were really kind of generous and kind with one another. They also, closer to kind of the end of, I guess it would be like the fall, like right before the water was frozen, they were running out of rations. So sometimes they would drink a watery soup of samba or barley flour instead of kneading the dough balls because they were trying to make their rations last for longer. And so you have this like really remarkable dedication of these practitioners on this island. And Shabkar was one of them. He meditated on this island for 3 years. And you can see there's a lot of buildings here, actually. I had the privilege of visiting back in 2009, 2010. And so you see here there's a stupa, there's several shrine rooms or hakang, one to Avalokiteshvara. I can't remember what the other one was, but there was a lot of these kind of shrines on the island. And this is from another perspective. You can see a couple of nuns. There was approximately, they said 28 practitioners who were still on this island way back in when these pictures were taken. So it's actively being used today. And these meditators would stay in caves. If Tibetan is one of your languages, you will recognize it says on this cave, Machik Lapchen. So Machik Lapchen is one of the greatest, Lapchen Machchen, right? So it's her cave. It's one of the great practitioners of Tibetan Buddhist history. She is said to have meditated here on this island, in this cave. Lama Shabkar's cave is also being utilized now by meditative practitioners as well. As you can see, this is actually Lama Shabkar's cave. So on this island, Shabkar sang many songs, one of which is a song about non-sectarianism, which I'm going to once again read my translation of. So it says, due to the kindness of holy forefathers of the past, in the snowy ranges of Tibet, many profound Dharma teachings spread. However, Dharma practitioners, having grasped the teachings as contradictory, like hot and cold, engage in sectarianism, attachment, and aversion. Some of the holy ones have said that Madhyamaka, Dzogchen, and Mahamudra are like sugar, molasses, and honey, each being as good as the other. Thus I have listened to and contemplated on all the teachings without sectarian bias. Sectarian practitioners with attachment and aversion, please do not scold me. When the sunlight of pure perception spreads on the lofty white snow mountains that are Madhyamaka, Dzogchen, and Mahamudra, it is certain that a river of blessings will arise. So in this poem, you can see he talks about 3 major systems that you see on the slide, 3 major systems of Tibetan Buddhist practice and thought, Madhyamaka, Dzogchen, and Mahamudra, that he compares to the metaphor of sugar, molasses, and honey, each being as sweet or good as one another. And in this poem, he urges people, this is very early in his career, he was only about 26 years old at this point. He's observing a lot of sectarianism in the community around him, and he's urging people not to be sectarian, not to discriminate between different teachings in a negative way. And he encourages people to have, on this slide, you see the concept of pure perception or dakna. And he is encouraging them to do that because he says that when you perceive things with daknang, then a river of blessings will arise. And so this is the second poem that is about non-sectarianism. If you recall, our very first poem was about the awakened experience or the enlightenment experience. The second poem is about non-sectarianism. And then now I transition over to the third poem called the Song of Definitive Meaning. So this song is taken from the 3rd volume of Shabkar's collected songs. And I'm going to read it to you because it connects his enlightenment experience to the theme of non-sectarianism, and it's all encompassed within a song. So the 3 themes of today's talk is all encompassed in this song. I have to say quickly, definitive meaning is ngeten. And this is in contrast to provisional meaning. So this means that this song is the definite meaning, it's the most ultimate meaning. It really is kind of the highest view. And so again, you're going to see themes from the very first song of this kind of enlightened experience, the way of abiding, resting in the natural state of your mind. So, like the sky free from extremes, however you observe it, one's mind is devoid of extremes, going towards the center. And there's nothing greater than this. It is called Great Madhyamaka, free from extremes. In the unimpeded vast expanse of the mind itself, emptiness, clarity, are all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana without remainder. As they have all entered utter perfection, and there is nothing greater than this, it is called Dzogchen. The emptiness clarity of mind itself, like the seal of the king, seals everything in samsara and nirvana without exceptions. And there is no seal greater than this. It is called Mahamudra. When equipoised in the natural condition just like that, may the mind be courageous like the sky, piercing like the sun and moon, spacious like the atmosphere, vast like the earth, majestic like the king of mountains. And so this is not the entire poem. I excerpted it from a much longer poem, but I present this as the third excerpt of a poem in this presentation because you can see the three themes again. You can see from the very first slide, he's talking about the sky free from extremes as a metaphor for the natural way of abiding, the natural state of our minds. You can see the themes of Madhyamaka, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, these three great systems, again in this theme as well. And then it's also a song. It's like beautifully written, just really elegant, eloquent, and profound in its meaning. And this is the third song that I present that links together the three themes of his enlightenment experience, non-sectarianism, and his ability to sing these gur, or songs of spiritual realization. Okay, I'm going to conclude with a vision. This is a vision that Shabkar had of the saint Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche. And I end with this because having read through a lot of Shabkar's work, not all of it, I haven't read through all 14 volumes yet, there's a particular emanated scripture called the Emanated Scripture of Urgyen. So Urgyen Drobel Lekbam. And in this text, which is also, he presents a vision, which he also presents in the second volume of his autobiography. It's basically identical. But there's a vision that I think is the kind of the crown ornament of his entire oeuvre. So all of his works, I think, really culminate in this moment a few years before he died. So this is really at the end of his life. He has this vision of Padmasambhava, who makes several revelations, but the one that is the most significant for the subject of our talk today is this kind of prophecy that he cites. And so I'm going to read it to you. I need to move my thing around so that I can see it. Okay, good. So Padmasambhava appears to him in a vision and says, in the future, during the degenerate age, or according to the prophecy of King Kriki's dream, the precious teachings of the Buddha will not be destroyed by outsiders, etc. Rather, Buddhists, having mutually divided the dharma into categories of good and bad, will quarrel due to attachment and aversion, destroying the teachings. In the future, during the degenerate age, when the emanated scripture of Urgyen, so this is the scripture that Shabkar composed, is placed upon the heads of people, whether dharma practitioners or worldly individuals, it will dispel all partiality concerning the dharma and cause pure perception to arise everywhere. Thus, it is good to compose these unprecedented, elegant sayings that benefit the teachings and beings. And so this is a really, really important legacy that Shabkar left behind. During his time, he witnessed a lot of sectarian conflict and kind of rivalry or competition, and he really condemned this a lot in his collected works. And I think when you examine modern day Dharma communities, you actually see this as well. And this has been prophesied by the Buddha. It says that the fall of Buddhism will be due to the practitioners themselves quarreling, right? So it could be different sects, different forms of Buddhism, different monasteries, and so forth. But for Shabkar, he really wanted to preserve the Buddha's teachings on earth. And so this was a really important part of his message. And I wanted to conclude with this vision, just to kind of emphasize the point of just how important non-sectarian is to him. It wasn't just, he's not just promoting it because for fun, he's really promoting it because it's integral to the enlightenment experience and also the survival of Buddhism, right? So I think it's a really, really important part of his message. And in today's talk, I wanted that to come across. So in conclusion, there's kind of two takeaway points I'd like you to think about from this talk today. The very first being Shabkar's non-sectarian attitude arising from his experience of spiritual awakening or nirvana. And this idea is not just isolated to Shabkar, but it's actually a lot of very good practitioners also have this attitude as well. And then the second idea is that Rime or Chokdrimeba, whichever one of those semantic variations of that concept, right, of Chokdrimeba or impartial, unbiased, in these texts, it's presented as a characteristic of reality itself and the natural state of our minds. And I really wanted to talk about that kind of from a practitioner's perspective. So this is the end of my presentation and the slides that I wanted to go through. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be really curious to hear them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. And if anybody has some questions, you can write them in the chat, or you can also directly unmute yourselves and ask. I have a question which is a little bit paradoxical. Has a lineage of his particular practices emerged? And if so, where is it followed mostly, sort of based on him as a person, as a lineage, beginning of a lineage, let's say?
Yeah, so what I understand about Shabkar is that, so he is currently in his fourth incarnation. When I was in Eastern Tibet, it was right after 2008, when they had the riots across the Tibetan plateau. It was a very difficult and frightening time, and just the police presence in the area, it was really hard to kind of ask good questions around. So I didn't actually ask them. I didn't want to endanger the people I was interacting with, so I didn't really ask at all. But I did, people did say, oh, he's in his fourth incarnation. But they didn't really offer to show me him, or you know what I mean? Like there was like no connection and I wasn't really sure where he was. But then in the textbooks, like when you look at like the history of the Ngakpa, there's a lot of books that talk about Shabkar's incarnations. They do talk about the fourth, and there's even an image of him, like in one of the books, I forgot which one. I can find the reference and give it to you. But he's in his fourth incarnation. I think for us in the West, we are exposed mostly to Shabkar's lineage and his teachings through Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, and then through him, Matthieu Ricard. I think this is a great Lama, Matthieu Ricard, who really popularized the Lama Shabkar and his teachings to the West, mostly through his autobiography. I haven't heard of his main practice was Dapaki Shin Norbu, so it's wish fulfilling gem, Vajravarahi, and Hayagriva. I haven't heard of anyone who got that empowerment or did this practices and so forth. I haven't asked like if Matthieu Ricard did them himself or specifically. So I don't know. So I don't really know that the kind of practice aspect of Shabkar very well.
Question in the chat, yeah? You've probably seen it.
Would you like me to answer that one directly?
Yeah, please.
So So our favorite sources to read and study more. Okay, so let's see. I'm just finding the image for you. Thank you to Louise Merchant's question. It says, thank you for your wonderful, interesting talk. What would you recommend are best or your favorite resources to read and study more? Also, which translation of Shabkar songs is the best? So, okay. I want to look up to find the image. Mathieu. Shabkar. Okay, so this is it. So I'm just gonna share my, oh wait, Victoria. Okay, so this is for Louise. So in terms of sources, I think the main source I would recommend for the life of reading his autobiography, which is really a beautiful inspirational work, is the translation actually by Mathieu Ricard and the Padmakara translation group. So this translation of his autobiography is only of the very first volume. There's a second volume that wasn't translated, and I asked why, and it was because I think it would have been too large to publish. There's nothing super remarkable that happens in it except for the vision he has of Padmasambhava. There's some kind of really important events in it, but it's a lot more of a similar thing to what's in the first volume. So I would highly recommend this. This is kind of the classic text, The Life of Shabkar, his autobiography. There's also another series of translation of his songs, and this was done by Victoria Sujata. And so I really love this volume because it gives you both the Tibetan and the English. So you get to have a sense of what the original text was like. Mathieu Ricard also has a series of series of translations of Shabkar's songs as well. He also has French. So if you read French, there's a French version of his autobiography as well. And then the last one I would really suggest is this book. This was edited by Holly Gailey and Dominique Townsend. It's a series of poetry and song, of which Shabkar is only a small part of. I did some translations for this edited volume, but I highly recommend it as a source to really read some really great translations. What's remarkable about this book is that prior to publishing it, we did this workshop. So Holly Gailey and Dominique, they hosted this workshop in Colorado. It was called the Lotsawa Conference. And so we had some really seasoned translators along with some very junior translators all working together. And I really think that these are very high quality works that we have in the Longing to Awaken volume, which just came out with UVa Press in 2024. So thank you for that great question.
If we don't have any other questions, is there anything else you might like to add, Rachel?
No, just thank you so much for coming to talk about a subject that is really enjoyable for me to talk about. So.
Very wonderful. Thank you.